Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, August 16th, 2022. It is 7 o'clock on the nose. This is a regular school board meeting. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Tim, how about you?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as far as a quorum, we've got 5 out of 7 members here tonight. Amanda is ill and Dan couldn't make it. So, next up on the agenda, item C is opportunity for public comment, but there is actually no members of the public present. We will offer that again at the end of the meeting if anybody joins us later. So we will jump right into the rest of the meeting. First item up is the approval of the minutes from the July 27th special meeting. Can I get a motion on that?
Second.
First by Gary, second by Carrie. Any questions or discussions on that? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's everybody. All right, next we will move into the superintendent report, which is going to be blended together with the strategic plan presentation.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Thanks for everybody for being here tonight. Beautiful summer night after the rain passed us by. Just wanted to start by highlighting some of the incredible summer work that's gone on. Our people have been working incredibly hard over the summer, from hiring to buildings and grounds to cleaning the enormous facilities to get everything in tip-top shape for the return of our kids in just a few short weeks here. So just I always, especially this time of year, because it's hot and the work is hard, just want to acknowledge our custodial crew, our buildings and grounds, and all the incredible work that they do to get our buildings ready for the kids. Got a nice letter last week from the Skinny Library thanking the Board of Education for their partnership and participation in passing their library budget proposition that is always separate from the school budget, but joined for the same purposes of the election and everything else. So thank you to them as well. They've been great community partners, and we look forward to many more years of service together. On the same vein as community partnership, just wanted to acknowledge the Skinny Atlas Music Guild and some of the community music that has happened, the incredible local performances through the Music Fest, Skinny Music Fest. We partnered with them this year to serve as raid locations for rehearsals. We lent equipment, we lent space, and our beautiful auditorium was ready to go in the event that some of the live performances of it and yellows got rained out. We're happy to partner with them and continue. They've been wonderful to work with, and just can't say enough about the people that have been involved in that process. And then lastly, just a quick heads up for updates was with our ongoing partnership with local county and state police. We gave building tours again today to both the Skinny Atlas Police and the New York State Police. Introduced them to our new principals, introduced them to our facilities, and made sure that every state trooper in the area out of the Elbridge Barracks, as well as all of the Skinny Atlas Police, have not just familiarity with our buildings and the people that run them, but access. So every one of them, their cars is equipped with access cards so that the police can access our buildings at any time. One of the things that is unique to Skinny Atlas, and maybe not so unique to Skinny Atlas, but everywhere else, is the prevalence of police cars on campus. When I first started, anytime a police car was on campus, my phone would light up and I'd get dozens of calls. The principals would as well. And we're really trying to work with the New York State Police and the local police to normalize that, so parents and kids can expect to see cruisers on campus frequently. They stop by all the time. We invite them to walk into our buildings and walk through our buildings, and hopefully continue to get to know our kids as we do everything we can to keep Skinny Atlas students safe. So that is it for my update, and if there are no questions, go ahead.
Anybody want to go first? I have a couple more questions.
You can go first, and then I'll do that.
Okay, so in general, school starting in 2-ish weeks. Are we fully staffed? Are there still any gaps? And that goes for both teaching, busing, custodial, the whole.
As of our approvals tonight, we will be fully staffed with anybody required to open our doors. There are a few interventionist positions that we're still working on, but we are staffed and ready to open.
Do you believe that those will be filled before school starts or
That is
within a short?
Within a short runway of school starting, if not by the time school starts. But
Okay. And then what about first student? Are they
staffed up and ready.
really?
Yeah. Projected more members than we started with last year, so.
Great.
And while a lot of districts really struggled, First Student has been wonderful to work with for us, and we haven't had the issues that we saw in year one of COVID, where some of the quarantine orders were keeping people out, and we were sort of hanging by a thread there.
Okay.
Last year was not going to be a wonderful year, and I'm expecting better this year.
And should some of our families realize that the bus is the most wonderful thing that you can do for yourself and your children, because you can put them on it and they drive away happily, and you don't have to wait in the really ridiculously long lines at the elementary and State Street School.
Yes.
There is capacity on all of our buses to accommodate all of our students, correct?
Every Skinny Atlas student
Yeah, we
can
need
take
to,
the bus to school.
So it would be so wonderful
yeah.
if we
somehow.
could do a little more encouragement to our families to utilize our school buses, because they are wonderful, and I'm a hardcore bus mom. And I think when I see that thing pull up, it is like Christmas every day,
Yeah.
twice, in the morning and in the afternoon.
I will say that the parent pickup traffic, the drop-off traffic that exploded with COVID-19, we hope to see that subside. It's caused not just a nuisance for the community and a traffic issue, but a real safety issue with parents that were sometimes letting kids off outside of the drop-off area and students starting to cross roads. So please, please, please.
But so
put your
maybe-
kids on the bus.
For all of the people that are watching, and that are gonna go back and watch this tape later, maybe in addition to that, we could do some communications over the next 2 weeks to start promoting the bus and reminding them that there is a space for the bus if they've not taken a bus before. We've got a seat for them, and we would love them to give it a whirl, because it is, like I said, Christmas twice a day.
The sooner the better, because it's.
Yeah, so I think we should not rely on the good hopes that people decide to switch to the bus, but maybe offer some encouragement and a little education on the benefits of the bus.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gary, sorry, that was a long-winded question.
No, that's an excellent question. Out of curiosity, prior to COVID versus this past year, what's the utilization been in terms of riding the bus? And it's more from the standpoint of what's the expectation in terms of what normal looks like. Do you know?
I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head. I can research that, but I can tell you that it has been a historic problem. Tim can probably speak to that here too. Is that Skinny Atlas parents really like to drop off and pick up their kids, which creates a lot of congestion.
I can speak from my neighborhood perspective. Every child that lived in my neighborhood before COVID took the bus. And besides my son, even when my daughter can drive him, chooses to ride the bus with 2 of the kids that live in our neighborhood, and everybody else gets driven. And that's a lot.
I would say it's under 4 years
That's like a lot.
Now or pre-COVID?
Traditionally.
traditionally.
And what is it at now, like 15%?
I wouldn't say 15, I'd say probably 25, 30-ish.
Right. The only reason I ask is because it gives us a sense of
Right.
what the
I mean, we did have that.
realistic expectation might be.
That, like, one bus driver mishap a few years ago right before COVID, and I don't know if that happened
I
at
mean,
the wrong
well, I
time.
think COVID was the tipping point for people, because we did ask them to sign up to agree to drive, because we had to
We
have
did. We
so
asked.
much empty space. But maybe now some of those families might not even realize that COVID, or that busing is an option, because that's all they've ever known. If you've got a second grader, your child has never ridden the bus, because they never were even allowed to ride the bus. So it would be great if we could, especially reach out to those younger populations and just say, say, hey,
We do
we've
our,
got room for you.
we do our practice bus ride for
Yep.
our infant
Yep.
kindergartners every year.
Yep.
We're going to include our pre-K families in that process. Actually, I'm sorry, we're not going to include our pre-K families because they are too young without the DOT regs changing. But we do our kindergarten, and we can definitely put out some more communications to encourage. If you want to get a sense for ridership, stand outside of Waterman in the afternoon, or make the mistake of making a left past the high school at the wrong time, and you get stuck. And it's a safety concern.
It's a huge
If
safety
there's
concern.
emergency vehicles that need to get through, and so there's a lot of problems that are solved by putting your kids in the bus. So please put your kids in the bus.
And you know, I feel like it's a rite of passage. Like, I rode the bus, everybody should ride the bus.
Yeah.
Either that or I walked, you know, uphill both ways, snow, 5 miles, you know, that old saying that.
But I think
I did actually walk quite a bit, but I did take the bus as a child.
I do know I was chiming in that slide 612 on something about the elementary. We saw it, or we did it in the morning after getting the bus. In the afternoon, everybody's going every which way with different pickups on that. I think it'd be so much help for getting the school started. We said everybody got on.
Yeah.
When the first thing into that.
We have planned to dismiss our littlest players that are coming in, our new 14 pre-K kids, just a few minutes before the bus rush in hopes of getting them on and out. They're going to need a little bit more help than the rest of our kids. The Waterman process that we did for the last couple of years it took a lot of time to dismiss the kids out. That is ended too, so we're going to have a faster dismissal on top of hopefully more bus ridership. So we shall see, but we definitely need to encourage it, and I'll make sure I send a message.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's true. Again, we'll have more the same if we just try to encourage. You will get the results no better than it would before COVID. Historically, we've been like that. So if we're serious about really trying to alleviate it, we might have to dig a little deeper in terms of how to promote it. You know, have finite lines or something, or do something. Just be creative. If we truly intend to even gain 5% on the pre-COVID levels, let's use that as a benchmark, because it's easy to exceed last year's numbers and the year before numbers.
Yeah.
What I did have in mind prior was with respect to the tour. Sorry.
No, you're okay. No, you're fine.
I just hear doing that. Sorry. With respect to the cops and security on the school property, right? So it's a great deal to have the guys familiarize themselves, etc. Periodically, our systems and processes are audited. Yes. How often are they audited? And first thing.
So annually by law.
Right.
Greg Santoro and Natalie, our new employee in the district office, are in the process of doing that right now. We by law, have to update our safety plans every year and submit by a certain date. And then throughout the summer, the leadership team has met multiple times already on improving some of those internal processes, communication, things like that, so that we're all doing things the same way.
Right, so based on that, I'd like to recommend to the board that once a year, we have the opportunity to see the results of the audit, because those are where the gaps are typically. It's great when we check every box, but as a board, you know, we've all been looking at what's been happening nationally, and I think we need to be one of those layers in terms of simply auditing the audit, right?
It's not so much that we have, you know, you can have the state police come in and review your processes, procedures, things like that. One of the things that I would say, just so the board knows as well, and you're privy to this, is that if we did share the full context of everything that we do in our safety plan, you cannot share everything publicly. So that's something the board can do in executive session.
Correct, and I'm not speaking about, well, right, in the executive session in particular, I'm not really talking about that. If you look at ISO audits, if you look at financial audits, if you look at a whole bunch of layers, you have auditing of the audit. You have to have checks and balances so that once a year, you know, we simply run through the checklist and say, okay, this was a flow, this was a shortcoming. Not only was it a flow, and it was a flow in consecutive audits, why is this happening? Because complacency, I think, is a huge issue with respect to these things. And, you know, knock on wood, we've been pretty fortunate. But if we put the checks and balances and it rolls up to the board level where each of us pay close attention and say, well, you know, bullshit, you know, this isn't going to work. What's happening? Why are these gaps there? Then I think we do a better job serving, you know, serving the community, our student community, etc. So that is something I think, you know, as a board, we decide but we need to have it as an agenda item. If the audit is done in October of every year,
Submitted by October 1st.
Right, that's the report. I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
right, that's the report.
Yeah, so if we're talking about auditing our safety and security plans, we'll find, you know, industry best practice people who come and do that.
Well, so we don't audit, or we don't have an audit already. We have a report,
We review our plans
right?
every year and update our plan.
So we submit a document that
Correct.
says, hey, we are compliant.
Here's who's responsible for what,
We
yes.
submit a district-wide and every school-wide plan
Right.
to SCD.
Yep.
They review the plan and come back approved or not. It's
Right.
not, we don't get a report back. That's
Oh, you don't get like,
No.
and here's 4 recommendations for you we'd like you to implement?
Right,
So I think
so
what you're talking about is if we
Possibly.
hire an external agency to come and do it,
not
or?
necessarily. So because we develop internally our plan and then we submit it, right? So I'm not suggesting external agency. I'm saying you submit a plan in October. When next do you brush that off and look at it prior to the next October?
Quarterly.
Yeah.
Well, right. So when you do it quarterly, is it documented?
I think it's more to do with, you know, what are the specific action items that you identified at the previous meeting.
Right, and I get, what he's getting at is, are they taken care of? Because if, in the September meeting, let's say you say, we need to streamline the communication between building A and building B, and then in November, you're saying, we need to streamline communication between A and B. If that keeps coming up every single time, who's not doing their job? Or why hasn't that little string been,
I think
No, you crossed up the list.
some of the big security update changes that exist in the plan are capital project type things that take a long time to correct.
and that's
And
okay.
that's fine.
And some of them are quick, immediate things.
Right, so this is what I'm saying, and be clear. How often do we internally review the plan that we submit and gets come back to us? How often do we do that? 4 times a school year, 3 times a school year? Do we have a schedule?
It's
Periodically,
traditional.
but mostly in the summer when
Okay,
it's a little bit slower.
okay. So that doesn't sound clean to me.
The state process is annual.
Right, I get that.
But what's our
Our internal
process? And if there is not one, and I don't want to
Let's
speak
do
for
that.
you, but let's set a standard that we as a district are going to commit to reviewing our safety plan
Periodically.
but something
Pick a
finite,
time.
quarterly. And it's going to happen at these set months. And then
Exactly.
creating a paper trail to show, at the first review, we identified these 5 things. 2 of them are capital improvements, so they're gonna stick on forever, okay, fine. But the first 3 should be taken care of by the next time we review this. And then when we go over it again, hopefully there's a different 1, 2, and 3, or there's none. But that's what you're getting at,
That is
right?
100% what I'm getting.
You're
Thank
right.
you. And and remember, we're all about accountability. If it's not measured, if it's not documented, it didn't happen.
So that's a nice segue, right?
When we are ready to segue. Right?
No, but I'm saying for the environment section that's identified in the strategic plan, that can be a goal that we put right on paper.
But this is
And make
one
sure it's
that
done.
we cannot have language, right?
Yeah.
This is safety. Safety always rises to the top. Sorry, Tim.
No, I got a similar question, but, and I don't know, because of COVID, probably interfered with others. How often, how many times does the staff actually, the buildings go through some kind of drill practice plan similar to what you would do with a fire drill or whatever as far as? Yeah.
So the fire drills have changed in that we do lockdown, lockout, all of the standard response protocol things that you see on all the walls. Those are uniform throughout the district, and the New York State measures that we do a certain amount of them every single year.
So you-
8 fire drills and 4 lockdowns.
All right, so It's the way you practice.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you go into Waterman Elementary, they
I've
have,
actually been to a fire drill.
they have some additional layers of this process that are targeted for kids of that age, yeah.
So and that's a perfect example, right? We have 8 of them done in a school year. Where's the analysis of what you found? Because we didn't respond in Waterman. I'm just going to use an example. We did respond quickly. Kids didn't know where to go. Some went left when they're supposed to go right. That is the kind of stuff. Do we have that document that we can look at?
The individual building principals do that.
Okay, so we do have a review, but it still needs to be rolled up, and that is the kind of stuff because, you know, if it just kind of happens and building number 1, elementary does one thing, middle does another, you know, it needs to be, again,
A single district
a
process.
single district review of all the schools as you go through it. So step 1 is you have 8 drills that happen. Step 2 is those drills should be reviewed and those results that are shared, and I expect those should be rolled up to the board. And the reason is it's just accountability. Because all we're going to do is say, well, wait a minute, this is shown up in 2 audits. This is shown up in 3 audits.
Or how come every single fire drill this year at a particular building has had the same problem every single time? There's clearly an education issue there with training, with staff, or with whomever, students.
It's an opportunity, and if we miss the opportunity, we want to be careful that we don't want to be forensically reviewing this stuff and saying, what if?
Right.
We want to be proactive. So we need to commit to getting it on our agenda, on the board's agenda, that we review once a year the audits that we have done of ourselves. This is not paying someone to come in. This is simply going through the procedures and process that we established. These are the response times, these are the different metrics that we use. And we've succeeded here, we've shown some deficiency here, and we have, as such, because it's a safety thing, we have now prioritized the resolution of this so that on drill number 6, drill number 8, we've shown some resolution. Long-term stuff and all of that, we could also provide updates on that. But safety and security is of paramount interest. So we need to commit to that and have something set.
So in that vein, I'd like to request if we can look at the day when it gets closer, but school starts in September. We're guaranteed to have some kind of fire drills between now and December. You'll have submitted your plan to the state in October, so those are 2 things. So let's tentatively plan for a board update in December as kind of our first initial, you know, and it's learning on both sides, learning for us, and we that's not what we thought we were getting, or that's too much or not enough, whatever, and something that we can work together on, but let's target kind of a December safety update for the board, and depending on the contents of that update, we'll determine if that is a public update or if that has to be an executive session. Because we won't know until the time, but I think December gives us a couple months to feel it out and then say, okay, let's head into the second half of the school year and plan to do another one, let's say June or whatever, you know, based on how December goes.
And we're gonna, you know, put it on, it's gonna be on the calendar, it's gonna be something that comes up every X amount of meetings.
Yeah.
If this is important to us, and I know it is, that's our single purpose of being here. We could throw money, we could throw curriculum development, we could do all that sort of stuff, but what we can't afford to do is be complacent. Because when you listen to a lot of these things, it's, you know,
Yeah.
It's kind of nice to have 2 new administrators though too, because it will be, you know, it can be the expectation right off the bat for them.
This is how we
And you
do
have
it.
2 new people with different eyes on things that might
Right.
see things that people didn't see.
Well,
Exception.
and that's the piece too that I want to highlight is that we work with the safety and security experts in the field as well. So when the state police come in, and there's people that work for the state police that will come and do this, and they will work with your teams and review it from a police perspective. Just walking around with the
And
police
again, if mistakes,
today,
if a kid
but
gets left
identify
in the
things.
bathroom, that's okay from a board level, we just need to know it,
Yeah.
so that it's an improvement, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
nobody should ever, because I don't think these things get documented, I think it's like, holy crap, there's a kid in the bathroom, we forgot about, we didn't know he's in the bathroom, that's okay, that's what these drills are for, is to learn from it. And, you know, we always say as a board, like, you know, don't ever be afraid to tell us of the mistakes, that's.
And you know, maybe there's some
that's
opportunities
something.
with our own self-auditing is having different principles, and this is not really board level, but just throwing this idea out there. be in each other's buildings for a drill. Because
Agreed.
when you are doing something every day,
Yeah.
you know how it's supposed to go, and in your head, you know that, oh, there's a bathroom over there that I gotta check, or I gotta do this. But when it's not in your house, you might, just like having new administrators, you're gonna see things through a different lens, and you might pick up on something that everybody else just knew was, oh, well, that's just how we do it. But what if you have 7 subs that day in the building
Yeah.
who don't know the routine, because it becomes kind of a routine when these are all just drills. So it might be helpful if we can have our administrators flip-flop with each other for some of these things, just to point out, hey, that one part didn't make sense. Or if I was filling in for you that day,
So-
I would have done that wrong.
Some of the-
And that's okay, you're not, we don't want anybody to actually be, we want them to be proficient in this, we don't expect them to come in as an expert. This is not supposed
Some
to
of
be
the
part of our.
buildings themselves necessitate different procedures because of the
Right.
schools weren't built to be fortresses.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of different aspects to the different buildings that everybody else should be familiar with.
Yeah, so,
But that's a double-edged sword, right? Because to use the same example, we have a high number of substitute teachers, visitors and all that. So should we run a drill? And someone goes in this building versus that building, it's going to be unique. So how do we close that gap? Because it's a reality. So, but unless it comes out during a drill, one, and we don't just talk about it, it's documented, 2. And in 3 years, we put an action plan together to try and effectively solve it.
Yeah.
3, right? So this is not a creative work, but we made an investment in our administrative capacity, in both the depth of it
And
the
then
breadth of
this
it.
falls right under Greg's responsibilities, and he's on already to his credit, so.
Right, and this is what I'm saying. There's absolutely no reason, even prior to that, there's no reason for us not to have a rock solid system that we have confidence in, because we have periodically audited, check, and it is not a gotcha. That has to be abundantly clear. It's not a gotcha thing. It's not a G's and H's.
Yeah.
It's okay. What are the issues? How do we resolve it and press on and share the information with the appropriate level of information.
So from a slightly different standpoint, my father-in-law used to be a bus driver for a different school district, but they used to have bus drills so many times a year. Now, I know that these first student buses are not technically synchronous buses, am I correct?
They are, we own them, and we do.
Oh, we do own them,
All
okay.
of them require bus trips as well.
And we do have bus drills?
Yep, it's the
Okay.
law, yeah.
My son has never mentioned one, so they must happen on the way home, because he's never
In the morning.
We have mornings, afternoons,
Yeah.
emergency departures.
Maybe he just doesn't
Yeah.
talk about it.
They're fun to the kids because they get.
Did you guys hear about the back?
Yeah.
They get these back door, yeah.
The best thing about the bus drive.
I just haven't, my kids, maybe it's because it's not grandpa anymore.
Yeah.
He was actually their bus driver, so they would come home and tell me.
Sorry, Pat, what were you saying?
Yesterday.
Just to add, we do have a safety committee that meets from all buildings. Administrators are part of it. We have minutes for, we say, hey, just what's going on around campus, what are we seeing, that's not, let's fix it. We have minutes from those meetings. They do get rectified, it's not something that comes to the board, it's not an established committee. But we do have those internally.
Right, and agreed. And what I'm saying is that if we use safety as the umbrella, right? Let's kind of pretend for a second. Let's not the eyes cross the T's. So it's great that we have a committee. It's great that we have minutes. It's great that we document the things that are the issues and shortcomings, the good and the not so good. It also has to be a feature that we document that we've corrected it, and the time frame in which we corrected it, things that we can address. Because again, remember, we want to keep this front and center. We have a ton of other things going on. I get it. But unless we have a documented procedure that we eventually get an overview on that's accurate, that gives us a nice cheat sheet, a nice card that says, hey, this is the way we've been performing, these are the gaps, and these are the things we've resolved. Unless we have that process, again, I keep using financial audits, or ISO audits, or any of those, it's the exact same model. If we don't document it, it never happen. If we don't measure it, then no one's really and truly focused on it, right? So, I mean, that's not a really common theme on everything, trust me, but we start with safety, right? We can't mess around with that.
Sure.
Awesome. Good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll revisit again next month.
December, well,
No,
we're
next
in next
meeting.
month, but
Next
But
meeting.
December is, December,
Oh, this one is
we're
going
planning
to-
for a,
No.
Did we add any doors in the capital project, like around the middle school gym and stuff?
We do.
Okay, so because I know Linda quick, like label, every door's got a name, a letter and a number, so are those doors, any new additions?
Yeah.
All labeled, good, okay.
So that's, some of that is included in those safety plans, district maps, updated district maps. And maps are only as good as familiarity, so that's where, the walking the campus with police multiple times a year, inviting them in, making sure somebody says high school cafeteria, they know right where to go.
Yeah.
They're not consulting the map and
Do
trying to
you,
figure out where to go.
Do you change the numbers on all the doors when you add? Like, does it get confusing if all of a sudden you went from middle school 8 to middle school 13, but they're next door to each other?
There's definitely some restructuring in the order of them, because they do go, without getting too much detail.
Yeah.
Because they do go.
Numerically or something?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
and can we assume that for this fall, like, this is not a board issue, but just a safety concern to bring up, the building will be closed for athletic events, because there have been numerous times, which I appreciate as a parent, coming to an athletic event and I have to use the restroom, that I just let myself, the back doors are open down by the,
Track.
that entry that's by the,
Restaurant.
oh my gosh, thank you, yes, the stairs, whatever, the seats.
You can.
And you can go right in there. And then you can walk around till you can find the bathroom.
They are not
And
supposed to be open.
so that is definitely an opportunity. And it was in fairness, or a slight gap, there's kids working out there, and someone probably put a shoe in the door. But those are things, when we've got both community members, visiting team members, and then whoever just strolls into any public game, we should just for all, just as we approach a new school season.
Some of the safety procedures that were normal to us with the school a long time ago are now barred by fire code, things like that. Remember the locking fences in the hallways that would keep traffic going a certain way? You can't do that anymore. Because
No, I don't know where you would see
I
that.
don't remember that.
I forgot all about that.
That'll
You're
be
right.
good.
They used to
Okay.
pull that and
So
pull us
there's
in the
like
wall
an
and
accordion
pull
metal
us.
fence.
Supposed to be like on the Titanic
Close
when they
off.
were.
Close off all the way. So these are fire hazard things that sort of died with code changes and other things like that. And-
External doors are different though. You've got crash bars from the outside, from the inside. of the
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they've got ways around code,
Yeah.
but not ways around code, ways that are compliant with code that keep.
No, we do. We have locking doors that can keep people in certain areas. But if you have a high school play, that's the same night as a basketball game, that's the same night as something else. You're trying to facilitate parents' ability to come in and see these events at night. It's part of a much larger conversation than just a single locked door. It's how do you police, if you look at schools, how do you police schools? All of the structures, processes, and procedures have to do with the school day. And then as soon as the school day ends, you have hundreds of kids pouring out of campus, all over campus.
Yeah.
And it becomes a whole different type of thing.
So you got to do role play, right? And scenario analysis. This is what the security people will tell you anyway. Well, we've got to find that balance and then never put ourselves in a position where something happens and we have to turn back and say, what maybe we should have.
Yeah.
Keep the simple stuff. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's not a simple solution. I'm not minimizing it by any stretch, but it's something that requires a focused, real good look at. I'm definitely not professionals all over, but we got to see where the gaps are and make sure that we're proactive about it without creating,
A police state.
I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying we have procedures, processes. Let's first of all make sure we're compliant and consistent.
And let's stick to the current, maybe we just
Exactly.
need to make sure we're sticking to our current
Current.
practices. And that it is a group effort though. It is a group effort by community members, by staff, by students, but it's a whole, and we need to ask for help. If you are a kid that is working out and you see someone banging on the door like, hey, I want to use the bathroom. I'm sorry, I can't, right? And I don't want to put that on a student, but I'm just saying it is a community effort
It is.
to keep us safe, and we need to be forthcoming about that and ask for their help and say, like, we need you to help us stay compliant this year. When you come to visit your kid at school, or come pick them up at State Street, you have to come in the office to do that. You can't hold the door open for the person behind you.
Right.
Which is very hard to do because you want to be a nice person and say, come on in, but you have to let the door close and they have to buzz themselves in. And that's not because I want to be rude to you. It's because that's the rule, because everybody has to get buzzed in. And maybe that's also some of our back to school education to our families about all being in this together and safety across the board. And in some instances, we are putting safety above courtesies.
Yeah.
For, you know,
Yeah,
just some
and
reminders.
just correct. The overarching goal is we want to make sure we're safe, comfortable.
Because it just takes one person. So I think you're right, safety above courtesy is unfortunately
That's
safety.
the word we live in.
Yep.
Yeah, especially just for all of our new families that are coming in that don't know any better. We don't want them to get a bad taste that we're just a bunch of rude people shutting the door in their face. We're just trying to,
Yeah,
we're actually trying to protect our child.
This is the norm, yeah.
4-week stops, right? 4-week stops.
Mhm.
So, okay. You
Any
guys get
any
it
more
just
questions on
right?
that? Yeah.
Got it.
Well, safety first and meaningful, and
Yeah.
document, right?
Alright, so are we ready? If there's no further questions, general superintendent update, we can move into the strategic plan unless you guys have some.
Just want to circle back on your one other thing about,
Yes.
so for custodians, through that out there to Parent Square, through our website, we did get one. Like I said, we put 4 in the budget. We have 1 custodial worker, 1 custodial worker 2. So we're technically still trying to hire 3 custodial worker 1s. We have throw that out again and put it in the papers and stuff. So we won't be fully staffed in that department, but just wanted to add that. You see that coming through.
Okay.
So, on that point, sorry,
No?
just, when we set the budget up, we have to evaluate, et cetera, the impact that the +4 is going to have, the size of our campus, the capital expansion, the whole kit caboodle, right? So, it's been several months, and the whole industry is upside down. It's obviously tough to fill positions. So, and really and truly, this is way too granular for this meeting. Just throw it out there. You guys didn't want to look at it. Is there a reason why we're not attracting people? I mean, there are a bunch of reasons why you don't attract people. And is there something, if you come up with responses or answers that suggest that you need to do something differently? Yes, you put it out to people and all that sort of stuff, but if we're doing the same thing that we did 3 months ago, we would probably get the same results that we got.
So we just posted it in papers and journal, or not papers, just through the district website, Parent Square, things like that. Now we've widened the stretch to
Are
papers.
these daytime positions?
Usually they're like 3 to 11.
Yeah. It's unfortunate they're not mother's hours.
But I will say, like, there's 2 families in my neighborhood that 2 houses that just sold, 2 families that are just moving in, but they're not moving into the beginning of September. So, and they're both out of state. So, I mean, the potential is there. I think for there still to be people out there that might be looking for jobs that are still moving into the district. It's just, so maybe we could be hopeful.
Well, you need not be a district resident to apply for these jobs. Anybody can apply for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anybody.
Just think out of the box. An industry that's across the board. I mean, entire space, we gotta.
Yeah.
Are there any districts that have part-time custodial workers that may want to pick up a second part-time custodial job? So if they're, let's say Marcellus is a half-time custodian, that we could maybe reach out and say, do you think that they want to go full-time and you don't have the capacity for another person, but we would happily take their half-time because the half-time is better than no time?
We can go definitely reach out regionally to surrounding districts.
I mean, maybe, I don't know if there's any that do have half-time workers, but that would be
In my
great.
conversations with colleagues, a lot of this type of position, it has been difficult. So I don't expect there to be a ton of, yeah, I think we're all sort of experiencing the same, you know. We can try it, there was one.
And then just after the consequence.
Yeah.
Consequences, you said you will be 4 plus 4. If we don't, places will be in disrepair, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think we have an administrator that has a bit more of a strong organizational bent.
Yeah.
So challenges just how to be creative.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a choice because you're not going to fill the positions. That is a problem. I mean, that's a problem that's everywhere. All levels. It's not just
Yeah, worker shortage for sure.
so. It's a result we're after, right?
Yeah.
Because of what we said.
Any other questions before we go on to strategic plan?
That was a long listen, by the way.
All right, let's jump into strategic plan.
So, for the sake of this evening, I'm not going to read this to you. I know you guys have had it, you've read it, you've looked at it. So I'll just sort of do a 30,000-foot flyby, and want to just start by thanking the community for the amount of information that they produced after we solicited from surveys and meetings. This is a distilled product of so much input and so much feedback. Really, the idea is to encapsulate the really critical themes that emerge throughout the process. Will people see everything that came up in those meetings? Absolutely not. But does almost everything that came up in those meetings fall under our priorities? I would argue pretty effectively that it does. Other thing I'll say is that this is not a finite document. This is not intended to be something that is written, left on a shelf, and never visited. The idea is to go back to this so that we know who's doing what, we know when it's being done, what other priorities bubble to the surface or frankly take over, like we've seen in the past 2 years. So it's iterative. It's supposed to be revisited. Those dates are actually right in here. And I have some suggestions and some other structures in mind that will keep this process moving and something that we do together as a community for the next 5 years. So the process overview, really the idea was to involve all the members of the community and reflect the shared perspectives. So just a quick history lesson here. This was the whole process that we rolled out. So back in February, we solicited the initial thought exchange and all of the community feedback that came in. And then what was really nice and creative about that is that the community got to, without our sort of manipulation or input in it, rate and prioritize those things that fellow community members were saying. In March, we had the draft mission, vision, core values. This is where those things started to bubble up to the surface. For the last 2 years, we've been talking about relationships, connections, and learning as our core values. So we took that as a jumping off point to develop our mission, vision, and then again reiterate our dedication to our core values. In June, the community team was assembled. The mission, vision, core values were reviewed. Priority areas were developed. Strategies were suggested. In July, action plans were developed that specifically identified what would be done, what objectives or what priority areas each of the objectives would be connected to. Throughout July and August, we've been doing revisions. This is where different drafts have come to the board for review, comments, suggestions. Tonight represents the last piece of that puzzle. So what I would ask is that when you go home tonight, you have the document as it is right now. If there are other things, if there are things that are resounding to you that need to be included or deliberately prioritized, like school safety, we can put those right into the plan. What I would ask is that the plan is then adopted formally by the board in September, so that we start the 2022-23 school year with a formally adopted plan. We communicate that to the entire school community. If you saw my message from a week ago, I touched on the major priority areas as well as the mission, vision, and core values. So this is what the community came up with, and we're awfully proud of it. Our mission is that every Skinny Atlas Laker will have opportunities and support, develop strong relationships, form meaningful connections, and explore multiple pathways for lifelong learning. Our vision is that the Skinny Atlas Central Schools community will be a welcoming and inspiring place to learn, grow, work, and live. It's one of the better vision statements that I've read. And then again, our core values are the same as they've been since we, in my first year, developed that with our leadership team. But one of the things that we wanted to do was clarify. So the relationship piece is that Lakers respect and value other people. Connections, Lakers are connected in our community, in our world, and in our learning. It's that kids need to see themselves in the curriculum. Kids need to learn by deliberately connecting content to their own experience. And you can't do that unless you know your kids, and that's where the relationship comes in. And that is something that after 2 years here, I will say we're second to none. Our people and the level of care and dedication that they have to kids here is remarkable. It really is. And then lastly, the learning all of us all the time. For anybody that was part of the last strategic planning process that expired in 2022, this was a nod to all that good work that the community did. Learning is all of the time for all of us. So that is our mission, vision, and core values that we are prepared to roll out. If you go to the next slide, Connor, you can kind of see what the priority areas were. If you remember back at our last meeting in June, it looked like we had 3 priority areas that came up. And then the last one that got added over the summer months through the review process was really all about the environment. So number 1, learning opportunities. We foster high expectations, rigorous instruction, inclusive learning opportunities, and student engagement. Number 2, excellence in human capital. This was largely driven by the volume of feedback that we got internally from our own administrators, our own teachers, people in the different buildings that sort of acknowledge that thing we've been talking about for 2 years now. We have 4 great schools. We need to become one great district and do things as one. That unite the clans, war cry that we say all the time. A lot of that had to do with that. Excellence in human capital really had to do with who do we bring into our organization? Who am I going to put in front of your children? And how do I know that that's a person that I would put my own children in front of? And then secondly, investing in them. I worked in the prior district and I was asked at one point, what if we invest all of this money in our people and they leave? And I said, what if you don't and they stay? And that is something that I think the Skinny Atlas School District has had a long-standing tradition of investing in developing people, even so far as into some of the individual nitty-gritty goals of developing plans with people that aspire to different jobs within the district, that aspire to different roles within the school community. Community partnership, I have it. Community partnership is all about the relationships, underlying the communication piece there, and how do we continue to leverage all of the technology and tools that are available to us to get the right information in the hands of the right people. I've shared with the board a couple of videos from Joe Sanfilippo, who's a Wisconsin superintendent that talks all the time about telling your story. This is something that resoundingly from administrators to board members to community members, we've identified that we need to do a better job of telling our story. Sometimes the board has commented that all they hear is the good news. I think part of that telling your story is to be open and honest about the things that we're struggling with as a community too. So that's going to be something that you'll see more regularly coming out of the district. And then lastly, the environment, and this was the last sort of pillar that we put in over the summer, is to create a welcoming environment for all children to thrive emotionally and educationally with a sense of belonging to the Laker community. What is special about being a kid in this community? How do we fan that flame? How do we preserve what works and build on those types of things that need improvement? So If you move on, you'll see the individual goals and strategies that are attached to each action plan. So under learning opportunities, and again, this is not the end-all and be-all of everything that we intend to do for the year. These were the priorities that rose to the surface throughout all the community work. So we talked about individualized plans for kids. We talked a lot about what success looks like for individual kids. There was a lot of feedback that we received about multiple pathways, about exposing kids to some of the wonderful CTE options that exist through BOCES, and really acknowledging that that's not a less than approach in our school community. It has to just be an acceptable other approach that our kids have available to them. And to be really intentional about presenting that information to our kids in a way that they know that we value it just as much as the other type of academia pursuits that they may go on to in four-year colleges and beyond. The pathways resounds clear throughout. If you look at the thought exchange that came up, if you were in any of the meetings, the pathways conversation, that word drum was pounded the entire time. Some of it acknowledges that we still are required by law to follow standards-based curriculum. And the thing about standards is standards change, like inputting computer science. That never existed before, now it does. Some of the literacy work that we've been so far out ahead in the state, and we've served as a model for a lot of other schools in the area who come and observe the work that we're doing. Largely was driven by standards changes. That's where all of this change initially began. The literacy work, as evidenced by the amount of detail that's in there, that is something that we have absolutely prioritized as a district. K-8, vertically aligned, science and reading backed literacy instruction is fundamental to every other bit of academic success our kids will enjoy. And to do that as a school district is a very, very unique and special thing. If you go on past that, I mean, there was a ton of information in there as well.
And not to interrupt, but just to clarify, this document or a version of this will be posted to the website for
Correct.
the community to go through after approval or prior to board approval?
For all to see. It's after approval.
Okay,
And
so in September, this will be posted, so all of this stuff, because I know Heather can't really see it from over there, anyway, all of this detail will all be on there, so all of our families can see the direction that we're going.
Correct.
And what we're talking about,
This
what
is
the real
what the
meaning is.
community prioritized throughout this whole process.
Okay,
These are the main things, these are our priorities as a district.
great.
And what Eric said is this is going to mold and change, and if there's something on here that needs to be on here, we'll add it. If something that's we completed, we'll put on it, but it's
So,
still change.
A great example is our safety conversation. This was the segue I was talking about earlier, is that when the world changes, so should this. When this process began, school safety had to do with respiratory droplets, masks, and COVID-19. And then there was a spate of shooting tragedies that happened in the country. And then the whole conversation shifts to, that's what we mean now about school safety. We're a school, we're responsible for all of it. And that's the piece. So if certain things don't come through as clearly, you have to keep in mind, I'm just mentioning this for the purpose of when the feedback was collected matters. Because these were the things that were on people's mind when they gave us the feedback. That always changes, which means we have to revisit it and add to it and let the document evolve as the world evolves.
Right, now that make one comment is that we must still maintain an overarching, just like a strategic plan. So whilst the tactical aspects may change, that's what you're referring to.
Right.
Tactically, you may move from an epidemic to another type of epidemic.
Right.
Whilst those things may change, from a strategic standpoint, your focus is still in the same place.
The
which is-
process of continual review, continual self-check, self-audit,
Correct, because it's going to be
that's what
across.
like change
It's
or
going
adjust.
correct. It's going to traverse that once we keep it front and center.
And if you go back to the priority areas comment, that is what we were so pleased that really came out in the wash on this was everything fits under one of those priority areas. So we're talking about environment now. But what that means and what the priorities within that will constantly evolve and adapt. But only if we're constantly looking at it.
North Star remains North Star.
Exactly.
Can I ask if we have a plan of attack if COVID were to?
Can we just, can we hold that question till the end so we can stay on track with going through the strategic plan? And then do that at the end, we'll go all strategic plan questions just so we can stay on track.
Sure.
Let's hold that thought.
Eric, before you.
Yeah.
So to clarify my end, this plan, you brought all those action plans were done with your administrative team?
This was, the administrative team met and distilled all of the feedback, and having participated in all the community groups and everything else to sort of distill it down into these 4 priority areas.
Prior, but those action plans that are coming up that you, well, going ahead now that you're doing?
Yes,
Those are all developed by you?
correct.
What's the plan to make sure all the staff now understands that?
To roll it out opening day and,
Okay.
and introduce them to all of these things. I've been working with Marcus. Marcus is, you know, he and I met to talk about what the priority areas are. We've talked throughout. A lot of our faculty were involved very much in this process throughout. So I think, you know, none of it is going to be a shock or a surprise.
No, I just want to make sure that what the plan was that they're educated, so they know it's a
Certain things that you'll see on here are already done, like we're talking about the EPK program, we're talking about computer science. You know, those things people are well aware of because we've already stepped up and managed our schedules and curriculum for it. And other things, you know, are maybe less applicable to certain groups and way more to others.
Like building by building.
Yes.
Okay.
So Eric, maybe could you finish going through kind of the summary of the plan and then tell us the plan of action to
Absolutely.
march it out?
So the next piece having to do with the next priority area 2, human capital, really again, it talked about not just onboarding people and closing the door and saying good luck and having people retire 30 years later. It's to have really foster that Skinny Atlas family environment where you're nurturing the people that work here, you're taking care of them, you're developing them, mentor programs, making sure that I's are dotted and T's are crossed, that every obstacle that we can get out of people's way that sucks up their time and their effort and their bandwidth is removed for efficiencies. A lot of this, again, was the internal sort of consistency thing that came through over and over and over and over again.
And just for the board members that weren't there on that Friday night when we had the community night, for each of the categories, environment, learning opportunities, human capital, we broke out into small groups that evening, and there was, I don't know, 10, 15 people per group, with an administrator kind of split amongst us that was the note taker, and it was very much community driven, and we all collectively, depending on the group you're in, came up with maybe, let's say 50, and then we cut it down to 30. So these things up here were not just created by people in this school that don't leave the building or in this office. This was a couple teachers, a couple community members, a couple parents, the board were all sitting at a table, hashing it out and talking through scenarios to come up with these kind of punch list of items. So I just want that to be clear that this was not a administrator created list. They helped clean up some of it and make sense of some of our sentences and our ideas for us, but it was very much a group effort and a bit of a brain dump and parsing through what we were really trying to say. And that's where all of these categories came from. So
figuring out what it was people were getting at and then connecting it back to one of the 3 or 4 pillars. But these are, again, thank you for emphasizing that. This is what the community presented to us as the priorities that rose out of this.
And as our guide, we had a printed copy in front of us of all of the things from the very first data online dump where everyone in the community could provide comments and rate things. So we sort of had that as a guide. So there was, a lot of thought that went into this based on larger community feedback that was filtered down.
It was an excellent exercise, actually.
So the next
It
one,
was a great exercise.
yeah,
And it was really kudos to the execution of it.
yeah, Kevin McGowan, kudos to Kevin for herding cats throughout this process and keeping us on task.
Right, and yet leaving it open enough where you had enough discussion and back and forth and then distilling it into what we have right now. So,
Yeah.
sidebar, good stuff.
Yeah.
So the last one really has to do with environment. And we sort of, when we looked at, all of these comments that came from that giant community meeting, they were sort of all over the place. So we met multiple times as a team to sort of say, all right, this one goes here, this one goes there. And then I think it became clear that there was this fourth bucket that we wanted to explicitly talk about. The environment, and if you have the relationships and you're making the connections, the environment is what we're all after to developing to make this the best environment possible for kids to learn and grow. So the goals that came up there, a lot of it had to do with thoughtful, deliberate professional learning, creating a sense of belonging. A lot of it had to do with the social experiences offered to students to make sure that as kids' interests change, we're not playing catch up. We're on the forefront. We're talking about things like esports, or it doesn't even matter what it is. If it catches another group of kids and kids are interested in it, it's our job to fan that flame and create a home for them. So that's really what a lot of the environment things were about. And then some of it very specifically talked to the fiscal stewardship of the board. And the example you've heard me say it 100 times that I'd like to bring up is that this district was financially in a position to provide K-8 in-person instruction. That's a fact. If we were not in that financial position, it would have been impossible to do. And that has everything to do with environment. And that's pretty clear when we were able to accomplish what we did. And a lot of that sort of stuff comes with, again, that vein of consistency that comes through. Tim and I have had conversations about the hiring cycle and the budget cycle. Gary and I have had a conversation. When things happen, we get out of, this is us getting out of that COVID pandemic reactionary mode and into a proactive, strategic, this is what the community says we value, this is where we're going to fund our resources. And if it doesn't fit under one of our 4 priority areas, we're not doing it. And then lastly, the accountability piece, a lot of it talks about what we were talking about in the same conversation with the safety conversation a minute ago. When do we meet? This was a draft, and I actually have Connor and I sat today and drafted some better timelines for when to have quarterly meetings. That's what was recommended throughout the strategic planning process, where we can meet with the board and say, hey, here's our goals, this is what we said we value, here's our progress on where we are in these things, or check that one's done on to the next item.
And at those updates, will we be able to provide us specific things that have happened to reach that goal, or
Correct.
some real life examples of some implementation of some of these things or execution?
Correct. And the last thing has to do with our committee structure. So if you look at the standing committees that we have for the school district, we have a strategic planning committee, we have an audit, budget, and finance committee, we have a policy committee, and we have a curriculum, instruction, and assessment committee. These are the 4 that we establish every year as our standing committees. I would like to propose that we formalize and adopt the student support committee. So under that can fall all of the good work that began last year with Kristen Moses and the mental health community forums that she held, and the interest was huge. We had a lot of family and student and parent turnout, but to really formalize and adopt that at the September meeting is going to be a recommendation that I bring. I'm bringing the recommendation now. It will be on the agenda if you so choose for the September meeting to adopt.
To add
as a
that to the
formal
committee list?
Correct. And then we will take those 4 committees. We will have the same exact process for establishing who's in charge of them, what faculty members are in charge, what board members are part of them, what is the calendar, and put it out to the whole community so that we hopefully get a lot more interest and participation. When we meet as an administrative team, these are the 4 priorities that we talk about. When I do updates to the Board of Education and to the community, I'll be doing weekly updates this year. These are the 4 priorities. Maybe not all of them every single time, but hey, here's some wonderful things that are going on that fall within learning opportunities or environment this week. Here's a few pictures of what that looks like. Here's a story about the hundreds of hours of professional development our staff did over the summer. And to connect those very deliberately to those 4 priorities. I don't want to leave any room for interpretation. So at the end of the year, when we look at those media releases, when we look at those emails, it's very clearly, hey, here's all the things that we highlighted during that process. And that's over and above the quarterly meetings where we can talk about the strategic plan.
Look, for me, like in order for this to work, we really got to take a hard look at things. And I from experience, when we look at these things, we sit in meetings and people tend to say, tell me what you've done to foster relationships. And people throw things out. And, I don't want to hear just all the good stuff. And I think we really need to take a good look at, I hear like, well, and trust me, I know we have fabulous teachers and administrators. I mean, my kids have experienced it. I've experienced it. I'm not perfect. I miss kids in my profession. But to say sometimes like, well, I say, I think we really need to take a look at ourselves individually. Well, I sit outside my classroom and say good morning to every student. Okay, that's great. But that really, when we really hardcore look at that, that's not fostering relationships. Saying good morning, that's a great thing. That's better, than sitting at your desk and letting someone come in. But, it's really listening to kids. If somebody says something, their dog died, it's asking about it the next day. Or
showing up to their event.
Exactly. And I'm not here to pat myself on the back, but I got invited to a 16th birthday party the other night for one of my students. And
That's amazing.
2 kids were like, oh my God. And other kids were like, oh my God. What's wrong?
Well, and Carrie, to your point, one of the things that it happened to be in the table that I was sitting at when I was there, it was helping kids define it. It's one of it's going to happen in this school year's action items is helping kids define, having their own individual plans, and helping them define their individual success.
Right.
So your success might be, I'm going to get an A.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Right.
Gary's success might be, I'm going to try out for the school play, but I'm terrified of public speaking.
Yeah.
But I don't care if I make it, I'm going to try out. And it's identifying those things, because that's a huge win. If shy little Gary right here, so shy, tries out for the play, that's a huge accomplishment. And that probably kept him up for weeks and weeks and weeks. And having that relationship where you say, how are tryouts?
Right.
Heard your question.
Yeah, right.
Can't believe you did it, so proud of you. That's
Just picking
the
up on
difference
something
between
little
good morning
about
and a relationship. And it's that kind of stuff. It's helping.
It's over and above what happens in the classroom.
Yes.
What happens in the classroom is critically important.
Right, absolutely.
But it's that extra thing.
Right.
It's showing up. It's that.
Well, and for us, it's just not checking the box. I'll never forget the student just last year when we were doing all the mental health stuff. I said, what do you think? And she said, well, I'll tell you that wearing a green ribbon isn't going to prevent me from committing suicide. And we checked the box. We did the suicide campaign. Look at all the kids wore the green ribbons one day. That was pretty poignant what she said. That's not going to stop me from doing it. It was great we did it. But that didn't have enough impact on me. That's going to prevent me from doing it. So we can't just check the box and say, okay, we did Autism Awareness Day by wearing, and
Right. The perfunctory,
yes.
community appeasement.
Yes.
I'm not interested
Right.
in that.
Right.
I'm interested in getting kids what they need. These priority areas were identified as growth opportunities.
Right.
It wasn't like, hey, we're absolutely,
We're so awesome that we should keep doing it.
these 4 things were the areas that people were screaming for growth.
Yeah.
So
Right.
this is what we're going to connect all of our work to.
Right.
And explicitly say, hey, this is what we're doing to.
And I would even go
Improve
back
these
and like
things.
extend it to the community, like you said, acknowledging, that kids are struggling here. It's okay as a family that we're not perfect, and, I would like to see some carryover that people realize it's okay to acknowledge your family's struggling right now. And, you know, to let the school know we're struggling, or my kids are struggling, and, you know, we're all human.
And it is especially hard to sniff out in high-performance communities
Yeah.
because of the stigma associated with.
Right. And I would even say to staff, it's okay that you're struggling too. We all have stuff going on at home. And you need to reach out to your colleagues and to your administrator and tell them that, you know,
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time right now personally, it's okay, you know? But, I just don't wanna see us like, oh, we did that, well, you know, let's tell the board all these things we did, because it doesn't, you know.
I want to be a place that takes care of our people,
Yeah,
all of our
exactly.
people.
Right, well, and this goes back to whether we are talking about we need more math help because the current grade level is really struggling, or we need reading help, or we need extra mental health help. We, as a board, cannot help or approve. I mean, really, our power is only to approve and say, here's a little more money, how do we give you this ability to do this? We can't do any of that if we don't know what's going on. And so if every principal and every administrator gets up here and says, this is so great, these are the 10 best things that happened at my school. I get it, it's, you got a job and you want to push yourself, and I totally get that. But also, you need to say, hey, we are still struggling with this, and we are hitting a roadblock, and it's not working, and I pulled Eric in, and he's aware, but I am really struggling this year with whatever, whether it's this whole particular grade level really is struggling with reading, or they're just having a lot of challenges in home, whatever it is.
Yeah.
We can't help with resources if we don't know, and everything's so great all the time. And then it's suddenly like a fire. So just be honest, because we can't expect our students to be honest. We can't expect our staff to be honest. If we're not going to be honest either and say, hey, some of this stuff is hard and it's harder than we thought, or it's taking longer than we thought, that's totally okay, but we got to practice what we preach.
Yeah.
And if we model that behavior as a district, hopefully our students will see that as well. They're like, wow, sometimes we stink at some things.
We're not there.
Right.
And I don't think that you can get there. I think you can make progress or decline, but that's got to be okay. It's that
Right.
This is an imperfect system, and we will die trying.
And it's
And if it's
also,
not working, we'll try something else.
it's a very individual, when it comes to a family issue, I think it's a very individual decision. Like my decision to have my crotchio know what was going on with me before I lost my vision even, and my family, was a personal decision on my part so that my kids could get what they needed from his counselors. And they did. And Lily's now getting it. Was getting it from Mr. Santoro's counselors. Brittany's been fantastic for Lily. So, but if the parents don't come forward and say, this is what's going on in my house, this is where you might see my daughter sneaking in and needing to take a little time out, this is why. So I agree, like we have to be examples for the whole community that it's okay to be imperfect.
Right.
Guess what? I can't see. It unfortunately it is what it is, but I'm doing everything I can to make what I do have work.
That's an excellent point. I mean, it kind of goes back to relationship, connections. What's the other one?
Learning.
Yeah, right. I remember, I think you and I were on a call on one of the things that we're talking about, comfort level, or the sequence of events where you need to, especially like someone new coming into the district, you know, if they would have had time to form a relationship with a teacher, principal, or what have you. And in the absence of that, both parties can see things from different places.
Right.
And you have a relationship with a connection. And there's why there's a huge responsibility on the administrative on the school side to make sure they foster an environment where people feel comfortable enough. And this is not just the students, we go to the community, right? So, you know, where people are comfortable to come and say, hey, Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Caraccio, Mr. Santoro, or Eric for that matter, hey, you know, this is my situation. And we treat it with the strictest of confidence. But more than that is we sort of, rallying troops trying to accommodate that particular situation. And it's, 12 months strong, right? So it's no easy lift. But I think what we're talking about is making sure that we have the right environment, the right people, with the right skill set, with the same North Star to facilitate communication, connections, relationships.
So, and that's the North Star, and it's right in our mission, and that mission is going to be everywhere, and it's all we're going to talk about. And, you know, I won't be, no one's going to convince me that relationships are the core of this business.
Human beings is not
It'll never happen.
it's not an education thing, it's a human
Well,
thing.
right.
And
What I
that
like
is
about
what's
it
special
too,
about this
and we've
place.
said this before, and look, we do provide a great education here, and there's always room for growth. But we said it before, we haven't talked a lot about the academic part tonight, because that's, you've said it before, it's not gonna mean a thing if we don't have everything
Yeah.
that's in the strategic plan.
Well, and one of the things too that I want to be really clear about, and I did deliver this message, is that relationships don't come at the expense of rigor. It is the teacher that won't accept that you didn't do a thing, because they know it's important for your learning. So they're going to give you another chance, and another chance, and another chance, and another chance, and make sure you do it. Because the punishment of, you know, a 0 from a teacher's perspective, that could be, well, you know, they have to learn that, you know, there's consequences. And from a student's perspective, it's, oh, thank God it's over. I don't have to do that. So it's having that connection and showing that level of care with the kids. That I care enough about you that I will not accept this. And I will come and find you and make sure that you do it. And make sure that what we're doing is important and rigorous and valuable. And that the kids can connect to the learning. Every kid. We're a public school. Every single kid should see themselves in the curriculum. Every single kid needs to be able to connect their personal experience somehow to the content. That is what great teachers do. That's the magic of the whole thing right there.
So my challenge to you then is, based on everything we've just said, is for you to lead by example as well with your staff. So when you give us your first update, if it's rainbows and sunshine, that's great. But if there's a couple storm clouds in there, lay it out on the table for us. Because if you, yes, and I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be great if it was all perfect all the time, but that's not reality. So I'm just challenging you to be cognizant of that, so that your staff sees, okay, he's admitting that some of this is hard. I guess it'll be okay if we admit that some of this is hard too.
Yeah.
Well, this is a heavy lift, guaranteed, if you have to do it right, this is a heavy
Yeah.
lift. So a lot of it is intangible.
And it's
A lot
about,
of it is going to be anecdotal.
and you said it's not about checking boxes. It's progress. And a lot of these are aspirational long-term goals. It's not something that you can measure as done.
Well, I mean, I want to check the box when it's about making a difference in a kid's life,
Yeah.
you know, and that's really what it is.
Correct. However, we're still talking about accountability. So we're not gonna segue like that. Because you're right, these are aspirational, they're long term. But there has to be a steady beat to the drum.
Yeah. Here are the things that we're doing to move in this direction.
Correct. You know, and it could be, you know, like you said, some very specific items. We've done an assessment, a gap analysis, and as such
Or
we
even the student action plans. That's a pretty measurable thing. How many are done? How long is it taking you? Was it realistic to think you'd get through every student in every grade level?
We have to
You know, whoops,
define
that's okay.
what that looks like.
Right.
Is there a portfolio that kids develop throughout their time, like, so you can say, like, you should grow from kindergarten. That's something that's really unique and special about City Adams. So many kids start here and finish here. More so than anywhere I've ever been. And that's, you know, those are the kind of things, they're not just special keepsakes, but it's a real tangible measure of, look at the growth over your 13 years in this district. You know?
Tim, you got any questions so far? Okay.
There's said that the best teachers can establish relationships. They know how to, things Carrie talking about, they know they care about them, then they start learning. Well,
Every year without fail, I stand in front of the entire faculty and I ask them to name the teacher that changed their trajectory, that changed their life. I need her to shout them out. And I
I'm
name
53
mine.
years old and I can tell you mine too.
Yeah.
I could tell you Liz.
And you know, you probably
I don't
can't
want to comment
remember,
on the table, but I
you
feel
probably
like
can't remember a single lesson.
Right, no,
But you can
it's-
remember the person, how they made you feel, how they made you feel like you could do anything, confidence. That's the thing.
And sometimes it's one sentence. One
Yeah,
sentence, it's
yeah.
all it is.
Yeah.
It's
So,
acknowledging them and saying one thing.
Yeah.
And that was her favorite part of her entire day.
so this will get on the agenda for the September meeting. The board will adopt and approve the strategic plan.
Yeah.
And then
I'm
you'll
just gonna
post it to the
update things.
website for the community to be able to read all 50
Here.
pages of it.
Here it is.
Okay, great. Are there any more questions about the strategic plan? Tanya, I'm coming back to you. I know you had a question, but it's not related to the strategic plan, so.
I was thinking safety in my brain, so that's why.
Just a quick answer, Tanya had asked about the COVID or any sort of pandemic. That's another required report that when COVID happened and we had to invent this thing, we had a deadline, and a lot of us stayed here very late, a lot of nights in a row, to make sure that we had our action plan together. So we actually put that out to the community. It was on our website, our COVID response plan. A lot of that is identical. Our plan, should schools be forced into closure, is to do the exact same thing we did at the final iteration of this one.
Okay.
So,
I'm
and
just wondering, I was just wondering because summer is always, you
and
know.
behind the scenes, we now have the devices, we have the training, the software packages, the teachers are ready, not looking forward to it,
Yeah,
but
sometimes.
they are if they need to.
Yeah.
But
And
hopefully that's
we'll-
all behind us, we never
Yeah.
do it again.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But we did throw that switch, and that was we developed those muscles, and we're not gonna lose them now.
Yeah.
So.
And that's always been my belief, is that I need to
Yes.
plan and write it down, I don't really need.
Yeah.
I shouldn't ask this question, I'm going snow day. Snow day, traditional snow day, snow day.
Traditional snow days. I will
Yeah,
not
we
be
did
the superintendent that kills the snow day.
Just asking, I don't disagree.
But if we get to the end,
Sidebar, depends on how much
yeah,
snow.
but if we got to a point at the end of the winter season, and we needed a day, we could make, if we were having snow days in May, we could actually make it we have 5 built in, if we exceeded that, we could do a remote day, but let's not talk about that, because it's still summer.
I'll be out there.
They're predicting a very cold.
It's not cold on the bus, because the bus has free heating, put your kids on the bus, the day is great. Okay, are we all set with the strategic plan?
Thank you all,
Yeah,
and
you're
by the way, thank you, board, for the amount of hours of your time and the nights and Friday nights that you dedicated to this. Don't think I forgot. Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Connor. We have a lot of things for Connor tonight, but here's your first one. Business manager report.
So there are definitely a lot of other items on the agenda for me to talk about, but just 2 things in my update. So I just wanted to go through our fund balance projection. We had our internal audit that we have every year, the week of July 25th. We're still waiting on draft reports, so those take a bit, but I just wanted to go through preliminary fund balance and where we're standing now, and just take you through the report real quick. For some members that have been here, have seen this report and layout, but for other ones, I'll kind of get into a little bit of detail of how we get to where we are. So at the top, we start where we ended last year. So June 30th, where we ended, where we closed the books. So this is just from a fund balance perspective, and revenue expenses are just lumped together. It's not nitty-gritty of those, but this is more balance sheet type items. So at the beginning, we have our reserve for encumbrances, and what that is at the end of the year when we have purchase orders that have not been paid yet and still outstanding. So when we do our pre-buying for supplies for the next year, where we think we are, and we have money left over for the coming year, we purchase a lot of items at the end of the year. All those items don't come in, so they are rolled over as encumbrances into the new year. So last year we had $425,000, and then it goes into our different reserves. So our unemployment reserve was established a few years ago pretty much when COVID hit. Unemployment skyrocketed, we were hit with a bunch of bills, we had some excess fund balance, and we created a reserve to offset some of those expenses. ERS reserve and TRS reserve, Those are for employee retirement reserve and teachers retirement reserve. The ERS reserve has been established for much longer than TRS reserve, which is very odd because TRS is a much more expensive to the New York State than ERS, but it took a lot of lobbying to get the TRS reserve established, and this is only the 4th year of when we can fund this. It had some stipulations about how much you can fund it per year, which the ERS doesn't have. So you can fund 2% of your previous year's salaries up to 10% of those salaries. So we've done the 2% for the first 3 years, and once this audit is finalized, there will be a recommendation to fund that for another 2%, which I'll get into towards the bottom. We have our tax certiorari reserve, so those are outstanding claims on assessments that have an unguided fee to the county. So there's a possible amount of, at the end of last year, $460,000 of claims being
That's when someone disputes their tax assessment.
So if their assessment went up, they can dispute it. That is put outside and is sent to us, so we have that amount set aside. If forever everything is settled at what the taxpayer wanted, that doesn't happen, but we are covered on that aspect. The employment retirement reserve, yes. So that is for compensated absences. So if we were to close the doors today, all sick days, vacation days are accounted for and can be paid out. So that's definitely a crucial one because last year we had 7 or 8 retirements that we had to pay out. And those were budgeted for in the upcoming year. So we're able to pull from that and fund those payments out. The next two we have are our capital reserves, both of $2.5 million, which are fully funded. So that's $5 million in capital reserve. That's used for construction projects that have to be authorized by the voters to use. And that's put up to a vote, just like we did in December 20 and back in November 17. And then the repair reserve, that is for miscellaneous repairs, very specific repairs that have to do with more emergency type situations. Very specific, which is why it has such a small dollar amount, because it has to be more disaster type things. But we have other funds set aside for those.
Okay, so we have more than $5,000 set aside somewhere else if there was some kind of major disaster emergency.
Absolutely.
Because that would cover about a doorknob, so, okay.
One dollar.
What's the tooth reserve?
What's that?
Tooth reserve.
So this was the turf reserve that was part of the upcoming $21.5 million project to replace the turf. So those funds have been moved over to the capital fund to start paying for those initial expenses like architect fees, construction manager fees.
Right.
So you don't have to borrow initially. So it saves us money on meeting and
Connor, was that the fund that was started at the previous capital project when they initially about us? It's an auspicious goal for sure.
Any other questions for Connor?
just down in fund balance. Once this audit is wrapped up, I will flow the board the draft financial plans. On the 6th, I'll come with planned reserve funding amounts, and then ABF will also be reviewing that, and the auditors will present it to ABF and then the board as well.
Great.
So you're pretty much flat,
Pretty much, yeah.
right? Okay. So it's good that it's probably good that we did what we did when we did. Right?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And again, translate all this down to what does it look like for a kid that's ski analyst. And that's what it all boils down to. And like my comment earlier, if you had not had planning like this,
Our children would have
Well,
a different COVID experience.
it's very different what we're able to offer.
But even what matters is what we're going to need to offer moving forward. Right?
And a lot of these, like the fund balance management plan and reserve plan, is going to be in
Connor?
Just the last one I had, which is real quick.
Oh, sorry, I keep thinking you're
Yeah,
done.
it's not done.
Well, I know he's coming up like 5 more times. It's
Real
like-
quick,
it's like-
just a construction update, so we're wrapping up the $36.5 million project. I have talked to Turner and Ashley to come to probably the October meeting, just to recap the whole project. Huge investment by the taxpayers, so it's good to get, the formal feedback and type of report. So I know the September meeting is pretty packed with updates and stuff like that, so I asked for probably October. But that's wrapping up, and we'll do recap on that and then segue into upcoming stuff.
Awesome.
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is a quickie. We added a Board of Ed update to the agenda. I saw some other school districts do this, and I thought it might be helpful, especially as we enter the school year for the community members who don't really understand how the board operates, kind of what we spend our free time doing. So tonight's update's pretty quick, just that our new board members have gone through board training. 4 or 5 of us, TBD, are going to attend a NYSBA conference in October, which the last one they had was just before COVID, and I was actually fortunate enough to attend that one. It's just a great opportunity. There's a bunch of different speakers and breakout sessions, and you can pick kind of your interest area and be with other school board people and hear how they're handling different situations or what's coming up on the radar for schools and what concerns might be. So I think that'll be really beneficial for those of us that can go. And I'm guessing
It's in Syracuse too.
it's in Syracuse this year, which is
I'm actually
great.
looking really forward to
And I think we'll probably all end up at different sessions, which is even better because then we get triple the
You can't be
knowledge
left
base.
behind, promise.
In addition to that, I am going to, at the end of, or middle of September, I have signed up for a leadership conference that NYSBA is putting on, just about unified board and things like that. So it's an all-day conference in Rochester, so I'm going to go to that. And in addition, I had 2 phone calls this month, which I didn't know existed, but apparently when you are board leadership, there's all these people that have all these resources that we get to tap into because we belong to all these groups. So I had an hour-long call with the development person for NYSBA, which is New York School Board Association, just to ask him questions. They asked us some questions. They made me aware of some resources I didn't know about. For example, they have an entire person dedicated to school board policy, and they have 1 million policies, pretty much 98% written, that we can cheat and steal and copy from. And just the other day, I reached out to them and said, what policy, because I couldn't find it on their list. I think I was looking under the wrong thing. What's the policy template that you have for accepting donations? Because we had that picnic table thing last week. So they sent me a very long policy that I will share with the policy committee so that we can scrub it up a little bit. But it's great. It's almost completely done for us, and it's got all the right legalese in it. And we just have to attach some dollar amounts that we're comfortable with, but it covered all the things like cash donations, financial donations, why we would not name it. You have to give it to us out of the goodness of your heart, not expecting something in return, blah, 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 blah. So there's a lot of free things that we get as a district and we get as board members through NYSBA, such as that policy guidance and things like that. In addition to different learning opportunities for us as board members or updates on things that we should be aware of coming to schools and school boards that we might need to get educated on that are hot button issues and things like that. So that's kind of the goal of this board update section that we're going to have going forward as part of the agenda, is just to kind of fill the community in on the things that we're all doing behind the scenes, because we do all put in a lot of time, whether it's reading or going to some of these things or doing a little background homework on trying to understand an issue more. So I just want to make the community aware that we don't just show up here and wing it and things like that. So that's all I have for that tonight. If there's anything anybody has a question about.
Just a quick comment on that. Appreciate you sharing it. I think it's a great idea for the community to know that we're not just talking about development of the administrative team or the educators, but as board members, guess what? If we're going to be effective at what we're doing and adequately represent what we've been selected to do, we need to make sure we're sharpening our soul. So I mean, that resource, I mean, my poor Ray is just hearing that. I'm really happy that we already have it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we can snag some of those things. There's precedent, there's language, there's all the support in the world.
Yeah.
And it'll just behoove us to tap into that, us board members. to
Yes,
tap into that to
absolutely.
become-
Why start from scratch when somebody's already been through it? They've got
You know,
something
so,
that seems to work, so,
yeah, so that's great.
yeah.
That's great.
I think
Thank
it's
you.
gonna be great. And then we'll do this next month, and hopefully we'll have a couple more updates. And my hope is to also include a little bit of board education on what our board capacity is, what our limits are. We are not picking a second grade teacher for your child. That is not in our bandwidth. And so things like that, just so people understand our role as a board, as a school board, as defined by the rules of this New York State, just so that everyone's clear on what we can and can't do and things like that. That's that. Now, we can move on to the new business section of the agenda. I am going to group A, B, C, and D together. A is personnel resignations and leave requests. It is the resignation of Gary Robinson, resignation of Judy Newton, resignation of Daniel Wayne, unpaid leave for Lucy Copeland. B is personnel reports, substitute temporary appointments. These are the fall 22 coaching recommendations that were attached for the board, the fall 22 volunteer coaching list. And then C, personnel, probationary, and permanent appointments. It is the probationary appointment of Peter DiStefano as a teacher aide, probationary appointment of Jesse Alberici, teacher aide. This is the most stressful part, is reading the names. Probationary appointment of Karen Drew, teaching assistant. Probationary appointment of Mary Margaret Biss, teacher aide. Probationary appointment of Jennifer Clancy McBride, teacher aide. Probationary appointment of Alicia Bruno, food service helper. And also approving the teacher aide, aides and hours in the cafeteria workers' hours as attached for the board in our board packet. And item D is the mentor appointments for Waterman, State Street Middle School and High School as attached. Can I get a motion on A, B, C, and D?
So moved.
Carrie, can I get a second?
Second.
Oh, Tanya, thank you. Any discussion on these items? Okay. All those in favor of A, B, C, and D, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that one passes. Well, all four of them pass. Okay, item F. Wait, I missed an E. Sorry, team. Flip the page. Well, because it's split on the page, that's why. Item E is, be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the purchase of science textbooks as attached for 10, 11, and 12. Can I get a motion on this?
So moved.
Tanya? I'll second that. Any questions on this? No? Okay, all those in favor of approving the new science textbooks? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that one passes. Item F is a roll call vote, just so you guys are aware. Item F is for tax rolls, tax levy, and tax warrant approval. Be it resolved, the Board of Education approves the resolution below to adopt the 22-23 tax rolls, tax rates, and tax warrant. And then we've got a very lengthy tax thing. Can I get a motion on this?
So moved.
Second.
Carrie, then Tim. Any discussion or questions on this?
Yes.
I was waiting for you. This is your
Yeah.
time to shine, buddy.
No. It's just a statement of comment. Connor. So,
He said
Connor.
I don't know.
Yeah, they are a team. So for the record, our, all appraisals obviously has gone up. The property appraisals have gone up. However, the equalization rates have been modified, as has been the case year over year, which has ultimately ended up with per $1,000 a reduction in what's paid per 1,000 in some instances.
Correct.
Right? Okay, so I'm making that abundantly clear. However, because appraisals have gone up, it may very well translate.
Which the district has no control over.
Correct. We just, all we do is the equalization rate that we also don't have any control over. The
That's the
equalization.
counties, yeah.
Right, so based on those things, the taxpayers may in fact, there are some taxpayers that will in fact experience an increase in taxes, while you have some experiencing a decrease, even though the rate per thousand has actually gone down in some instances. And that's purely based on the thing that the district has no control over, which is the assessment.
Correct.
So, in the real world, if your value for property has increased, then you pay a little more. If your value has increased by a lot more, then you pay a little more. And which seems to be equitable, the grand scheme of things, which is what we were. I bring this up because during budget season, right, when we were all kind of looking forward and saying, well, what should we do? How should we balance this thing out? What's an appropriate number? We use 250,000 or something like that as a house
As our
balance,
baseline.
as a
median
baseline.
home sales at that point, right?
Yeah, right. When we went through that whole exercise, we were throwing it out there hypothetically. This is what will happen. Boom, boom, boom. So now we fast forward. This is what has happened. This is the result. And in fact, we can demonstrate and show that you pay a little more purely the value of your property, which means your net worth, your equity. If your equity has gone up, then you're being asked to pay a tad more. If your equity has gone up, tremendously, then you proportionately pay a bit more. Right? So this is closed loop. So next year, when we get to this exact same point, in January, February, March, and we're having our internal discussions with everybody here as a beauty in it, we would be better informed and have a better insight for the things that we have control over in terms of where we need to set our thresholds.
Correct.
Right? That's why I wanna, it's purely for that reason, I wanna to dive in and make sure it's abundantly clear, and hopefully guys could, members of the community could dive in and look and see exactly what it means.
If you think of it just easily, our levy is a big pizza. Every slice is per 1,000. The assessment goes up, more slices go out, and they're worth less, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have thousands of that, you're taking smaller slices. And again, as Gary said, your tax rate per 1,000 will go down.
But your overall bill is probably going up because the appraised value of your home is higher.
Right, but your appraised value being higher adds to your personal net worth.
Sure.
So
And
there's
we
a
have
benefit.
nothing to do with that anyway.
Correct.
Nothing to do with the appraised value of your
Or
home.
equalization.
We
more
do not set
importantly-
that.
More importantly is equalization, because the equalization rate is actually going down in many cases.
In every town.
In every town in our district,
6 to 13%.
it is going down, right?
Yep.
So,
And the year before it went up.
correct.
So,
So it cuts both ways.
Yeah.
So, but to match that, the amount per 1,000 was higher. That's why we have a reduction now.
correct.
So I think the more the general public understands, I mean, you mentioned earlier, what do the board members do? Well, we kind of sink our teeth and try to figure out and distill all this stuff. And the more the general public and the taxpayers understand that, this is the outcome, this is what we were talking about back in March, April, May, this is the result, we'll be better positioned to come next quarter on, so we could, be more informed, and then we could take a decision that says, let's do this, because we have a better sense of how it works, barring what happens in things we don't have control.
Right.
When you budgeted back in March and April, we had an equalization rate, correct?
Some were not finalized, but a general assessment, yeah.
Why do they change when it comes to the time to actually do the tax warrant at the end?
That's when the assessor goes out and is actually doing their assessments on all the houses, and then
So it's not a match right now. I mean, right, if you had those numbers, if you had his numbers back in March or April,
we have
maybe
preliminary
figures,
figures.
right?
Yeah.
We have no control over that, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, is like state aid, right? When we build out the budget,
then.
We have a provisional state aid, and we say you this, that, you know, we make a bunch of assumptions, and then we set the budget, boom, real close to where the state aid gets finalized, and then we're like, well, you know, one way or the other, it's favorable, it's unfavorable. So the sequencing is kind of funky. You know, yeah, the equalization rate and the assessment also factors in, but we just want to make a
It's hard to
decision.
explain every year when Connor gets calls. Explain this to me, yeah.
Right, and that's why I took the time at this juncture to kind of use the forum to discuss it, because, you know, sometimes you're assessed, not to use that, overuse that word, but.
My assessment better go up, that's all I gotta say.
Oh. Yeah, you're the only person saying that.
What'd you say?
I said, you're the only person saying that.
Well, you know, again, once better understand the mechanics of it, I think this way Connor takes some of the heat off of Connor. It's not his doing, it's really.
Appreciate that.
It's definitely not your fault. I mean, it's totally your fault, but it's not.
Every now and again, we help you out.
Any more questions on this from anyone? Okay, so this is a roll call vote, so I'll call out your name and you have to say yea or nay on this one. So Tanya Coleman.
Aye.
Okay, Tim.
Aye.
Gary.
Aye.
Amanda is not here. Dan is not here. Carrie Brogan.
I say yay, because that's what you said.
I know, yay, aye. And then I am also a yay, aye,
Oh,
yay,
geez.
yay, nay.
It's a-
Counter got it. You got it. Okay. So that passes. All right, I am going to group G through M together. G is the secret resolution for the capital outlay. H is the first student contract extension. That's our bus company that we use. And I is the funding, is approval of funding for the school guards for the 22-23 year. And I had asked this question prior when I saw this. It is specifically worded that way because these are for our SRO, so this is for Aileen and Jim O'Brien. This is both for their funding and for approval that they can have a, is it conceal and carry? Or that they're allowed to possess a firearm on campus. J is approval of the cafeteria staff agreement, which is attached for board members. And K is managed print services with Cayuga BOCES. We utilize some of their printing services.
Last
The
is the
agreement's
same
in
one,
here.
what we share.
Copy or lease with Cayuga BOCES, same thing, just opportunities to save money through some consolidation and purchasing and all that good stuff. M is a disposal of furniture. So, can I get a motion for G through M?
So moved.
Second.
First Carrie, second Tanya. Any questions or discussions on these items?
K and L, can you, I don't know how I say it, I've read a bunch of things in the backup information. Is this the most efficient way right now to be able to do this?
Most efficient for the best cost effective.
It is, okay.
So,
Compared to going with a copier company that provides whatever.
yes, and that, now we can get on it.
They leverage bulk pricing and we generate aid on it.
Okay.
So previously in the management contract, it includes consumables, which is toner or paint. Previously, consumables, if you're purchasing for BOCES, was not aidable, but now since it's under a contract.
So I know I read something that's worth it, okay.
And what also comes with this is parts and service on our printers. That is taken away from our tech department.
Okay.
So it saves them time to do all the thousands of other things that, so thank you to them for what they do during the summer, but takes away from them and it allows us to generate it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, that's 25K a year, that's 75 for 3 years, right?
Yes, yeah, 36 months, yeah.
Any more questions on these items? Okay, all those in favor of passing G through M?
Aye.
Okay, nobody's opposed, those all pass. Next item is N, it's a budget amendment to our debt service. Be it resolved, the Board of Education approved to amend the 21-22 budget in the amount of $243,564.90 due to an unexpected premium in the July 7th, 2021 $30,831,000 BAN borrowing, which I will ask you as soon as I get a motion on this one. Can I get a motion?
So,
Tim,
second.
Gary seconds. Any questions? Yeah, what is BAN borrowing?
It's a debt bond anticipation notice, so when you're
Okay.
going through projects, you don't know what your final costs are yet. So when you finalize those up, since we are doing right now, we will bond in June for that final dollar amount. So these are just recurring borrowings until we finally permanently finance.
Okay.
Why unanticipated?
Because we don't know what the premium would be on an initial borrowing. So the premium would be fluctuations in the interest rates from the time of posting to the time of closing of these bonds. So I don't know, back then, the interest rates were super, super low. In their initial, and I attached the closing document for board consumption, but it was 1% and then ended up being down to 0.04%. So
Okay, so that's purely based on.
that is purely how the
Prime.
economy functions. Yeah.
Right, okay. Fed funds and all that jazz.
Any further questions on this item? Okay, all those in favor of passing this budget amendment for the debt service, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that one passes. Next, we have item O, financial reports. Be it resolved, the board approves the attached financial reports for month ending June 22. Can I get a motion on this?
So moved.
Second.
First by Carrie, second by Tim. In our board package, we had a whole buffet of reports. Any questions on these? Connor, anything we should be concerned about or we should be asking you about on these? It was out of the ordinary for you?
Nothing out of the ordinary, status quo, just a lot more activity towards the end of the year with debt service payments, school payments for teachers. So just more activity, but all status quo.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, aye as well. That one passes. Next item P, CSE, CPSE 504 reports. Be it resolved, the Board of Education arranges the placement of students with disabilities as recommended by the CPSE, CSE 504 committees. And there is a bunch of those reports attached for board members. Can I get a motion on that?
So moved.
First by Tim, I will second that. Any questions on these?
No, just by admission, I did not go through all of them, because there were so many.
This one just is this up or down?
That's a good question. The
On the
11
number of
reports.
special ed.
Yeah. It seems, I mean,
Year over year, or
yeah, just generally.
the trend is up.
Right.
And we have a more prevalent phenomenon lately with people seeking independent evaluations. It's not just us, it's a special education phenomenon. But we're awful proud of the services that we provide. And we provide a whole lot of special education type interventions that don't require a label or special education designation. And that's something that the City Island School District has done for forever to take care of kids. But
Is the
The trend is
September,
up.
but is the back to school, well, we're in August, but is the back to school grouping usually the largest amount of reports?
Well, it's final review, annual reviews.
Still
The
wrapping up
finalization
last
of this
year.
process is right around that.
Okay,
Yeah.
End of the school year is typically when you see most of the changes.
okay.
Okay.
Which then is making it
To
all clear in
prepare
this list.
everybody for
Okay.
Next.
22-23.
Right.
So that IEPs are amended, we can plan for those amendments and make sure we're appropriately staffed and can service the legally required accommodations that are in the IEPs. Busier industry, busier time of year. Yeah.
Some school, I mean, an annual review has to be done every year, but some schools choose to do it throughout the year, some do it all in the spring, so I think that's why you're seeing a larger amount now. It's just,
So it's not a
they're
dead.
not necessarily new referrals, although some of them probably are.
So some of them coincide with new kids coming into the district,
Yeah,
which
the
happens.
spectrum of 504, the definition of what falls under that is so much bigger than it used to be. So
Okay.
they have seen an increase in those and.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any Okay, all those in favor of approving the reports?
Aye.
Okay, that passes as well. We're on to closing items. First item up, process review, agenda planning for our September 7th meeting, which is the staff's first day, right? Staff first day and students first day is the next day. It's
I
gonna
thought the
be,
meeting was on the sixth.
Wait, it's
Oh.
six.
sorry, I got my,
No, you didn't, it's wrong.
okay, it's wrong on the paper. That's why I was like, wait a minute, this isn't.
I was like, I just. put it
Okay,
in the
so the
calendar.
next board meeting is September 6th, so we will, I don't know why it says 7th in here, it's September 6th, but we are gonna do a agenda setting on Tuesday, August 31st.
Oh,
Who
okay.
would like to sign up for agenda setting on August
It's Wednesday,
31st?
the 31st, so.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is really, and that's why I usually pull out my calendar, it's Wednesday, all right, who would like to do agenda setting on Wednesday, August 31st?
Can you just, if I can just ask my phone, if you don't mind, I don't mean to be a pain in the tuchus.
Sure, but
I
would
would love
anybody like to
volunteer. I don't think
I
it's
can
gonna
do
be a
it.
problem, I can probably get somebody.
Or wait, oh, no, I can, well, if it's 4 o'clock, I can do it, because I go back to school. that
You're
day,
back
so.
to school, do you want to do it?
I can do, but I can do 8 AM, so.
You can do 8 AM, Gary, or Tanya, do you?
I can do it anytime,
Okay,
as long as, like, you know, if I can't get a ride, Tim can.
okay, let's
That's
circle back
Wednesday,
on that,
right?
so Tim can do 8, Carrie can do 4, Tim can do 8, Carrie can do 4, Amanda can probably,
I can
but
do
she's
both.
probably back for school then too.
Oh, I can get a ride, but yeah.
I will, let's circle back on that, we can send out an email and figure out, make sure 3 of us can be there, and we will figure it out. Okay, so, our board meeting is Tuesday, September 6th, which is the night before the first day of school. To get home and make all the lunches, so I'll have to talk really fast that night.
They should buy lunch.
Spoke like a businessman.
Hey, Sam actually loves it. He is so excited.
Yeah, I had to talk to my son already, and I said, no more of this going up and eating 9 bags of chips, and I'm getting the delinquent notices. Need a $35 thing on my credit card that automated system. I like the cash better, because once you run out on Tuesday, that's not my problem. There's a whole drawer full of granola bars you can eat. No, we've got no announcements. Our next meeting is Tuesday, September 6th, and then Tuesday, October 5th. I assume that date is right, but let me double check, 'cause I don't know. Oh, no, it's October 4th. Okay, so September 6th and October 4th. And now would normally be the time for the second opportunity for public comment, but since we don't have any visitors here
No,
tonight.
I thought I heard Heather come back in.
Nope, she left, so we are good on that. So with that, if there is nothing else that we need to go over, I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Can I just ask, I thought we were approving the coaches, but you didn't say any coaches' names.
You have that in the board
So that's
packet.
all, okay.
We approved the slate of coaches,
Okay.
and all the volunteer coaches, so it's for all of the sports, there's a long list of them.
It was for everyone,
Yeah,
yeah. No problem.
It's-
I just did want to make sure I didn't miss it.
no, it was the first item in that grouping of things, it was the fall, it was listed as fall coaching recommendations and fall volunteer coaching recommendations, so the list for both. Anything else? No? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So,
Oh, wow, team, Carrie and Tanya. Thank you, we are adjourned at 9:11 p.m. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate
Eric,
it.
can I sue you for a second?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.